Hey, what's up, Nashville? I am Beau Beach. This is the Free Speech Podcast presented by Beechwood Commercial Real Estate Brokerage, your commercial real estate broker if you are a seller of commercial properties in Nashville or the Southeast. If you've listened to the podcast before, you kind of know the format. We're going to bring you up to date on the most interesting stories of the week. I'm going to give you a quick overview of those stories that we are going to cover, and then we'll get into it. As I explain some of these stories to you, I'll add some personal anecdotes, some clarifying information that I think will speak to the current state of our commercial real estate market and everything that's happening in Nashville. I'll do my best to keep it moving and make it informative and maybe perhaps enjoyable. So let's get into it. The number one story on our list, the Ernest Tubb Record Shop adds a members only component. So this is a big multi-year project. They've kind of laid out exactly what the Ernest Tubb Record Shop will be going forward. Very interesting what they've chosen to do here. I'll walk you through that. Next, Oracle expands the land it owns in River North. Again, they just keep acquiring land. They don't actually build on it, but they have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on land and just added again to their parcels. Next, another development site doesn't proceed and is relisted for sale. This is a trend that we're seeing more and more in Nashville. I'll tell you that story. A Green Hills luxury development does move forward. So one of these big projects that's actually proceeding, I'll walk you through that. West Haven expands again. West Haven, one of the largest residential developments in Middle Tennessee, where a very, very nice residential development. In fact, I considered moving our family there, but I just don't like the location. Too much of your life wasted in traffic getting over there. But once you're there, it is lovely. I'll tell you what they've got planned there. A trophy office building lands a much needed tenant. So if you've been following the office business in the downtown core for any period of time, you probably understand that more tenants are leaving than they are choosing to move into that area. I'll walk you through who that tenant is and why that's such a big deal for that office building. Introducing the new Urban Cowboy Bar, which is a very cool concept. So, I'm coming at these, we're going to talk about a few different bars today. I'm coming at these from a business perspective. Anybody that knows me knows that I don't participate in the consumption of alcohol anymore. So, I'm not kind of pitching you on these places to get drunk, but what I am trying to bring you up to date on is these very, very high priced, very high profile new businesses that happen to be bars entering Nashville. We'll discuss a few of them today. Next, the Bridgestone Arena is getting a major, major upgrade to the tune of $650 million. Okay, so I'll walk you through exactly what $650 million gets you. The Nashville Yards entertainment concept changes. So this is something that was announced back in 2022. A very big deal for the Nashville Yards development. That's kind of the plan has kind of changed over time, and I'm going to walk you through exactly how that's going to play out. A game and karaoke bar replaces what was known as the Kung Fu Saloon, right? So again, we're going to come at that from a business perspective. And lastly, another related concept, which is immediately next door to the former Kung Fu Saloon, called Odie's, which is a partnership between a very active real estate developer and bar operator and the country music band known as Old Dominion. This is a very, very cool project, a big upfront investment, but But Midtown is kind of popping right now, and this group called Good Time Design is really leading the charge with both that new game and karaoke bar and Odie's in Midtown. They've got a third concept coming nearby as well. So a lot going on in Midtown. I would tell you that the theme of moving out of that downtown core and moving to areas like Midtown and Germantown, it extends to bars and restaurants as much as it does office space, right? So we're seeing real trends away from that downtown core. All right, y'all, let's get into our stories today. The Ernest Tubb Record Shop adds a members-only component. The multi-year restoration of Ernest Tubb Record Shop is scheduled to be completed this fall. Tusk Brothers Entertainment is behind the popular concepts Never Never and Reunion Bar and Hotel. They began working with Ernest Tubb's grandson, Dale Tubb, in 2023 to bring the historic record shop back to life. Tusk Brothers launched the Nashville Music Collective, a program allowing the community to invest in and own a piece of the new Ernest Tubb Record Shop. So that's very cool. A program allowing the community to invest in and own a piece of this new concept. The minimum investment is only $3,000, and there will be special incentives for investors of the Nashville music community. So very cool. You can own a piece of this new concept if you choose to, and maybe get a little bit of special treatment as you visit it if you decide to. The first floor will house 2 bars, each with a live band stage and decor, which will feature Tubb and the old Texas memorabilia. The reinterpreted record shop will live on the second floor and host performances like the original shop, including a new rendition of the Midnight Jamboree. The Midnight Jamboree was this musical performance that took place in the record shop years and years ago when it first opened. Label events, artist spotlights, and specialty shows will be reserved for the third floor. The fourth floor rooftop bar will have the honky-tonk atmosphere that made Lower Broadway famous. So 4 different floors, 4 different uses, plus we've got the lower level now being activated called the Victor, a new members-only club named after the RCA Victor radio. Will be located on the lower level and designed to feel like the building's old recording studio. Ernest Tubb Record Shop opened in the Lower Broadway building at 417 Broadway way back in 1951. The business sold vinyl records, songbooks, and 8-tracks by day and opened to performers at night. So, a former vinyl record, songbook, and 8-track store that also hosted performers at night now has become a 5-level entertainment complex on Lower Broadway that you can buy into with as little as $3,000. So a very cool idea. You know, they're trying to incorporate the nostalgia, the historic significance of the record shop by also, but also at the same time, modernizing the building and kind of profit maximizing the building, right? So the Ernest Tubb Record Shop is going to be a very, very cool spot on Lower Broadway. You know, mostly for tourists to take a look, you know, but us locals, perhaps we get down there every once in a while and want to see what all the hype is about. But what I would tell you about this concept is very, very creative, right? You've got people that know what they're doing involved here, and they are really profit maximizing every floor of that very, very valuable building and opening up outside investment for as little as $3,000 per investor, which to my knowledge doesn't exist anywhere else in Nashville. And I know that idea of being able to stroke a check for a few $1,000s and be able to say you're a part owner in the record shop, I think that's going to work. I think people like that, especially if you're to get special incentives for having done so. They make you feel like a VIP when you show up as a part owner of the concept. So very, very cool story. That's what we're starting with. Next, Oracle. Oracle spent $42 million more on another East Bank parcel of land. Oracle bought a River North property from Washington, D.C. based MRP Realty and Chicago-based Creek Lane Capital that had been slated for development by the firms. The transaction pushes the tech giant's real estate holdings to more than 70 acres and a collective $379 million spent on just the land. The new parcel spans 2.73 acres and had been eyed for the second phase of the development known as the Landings at River North. The seller paid $16.3 million for the site in 2019. So they've been sitting on that site for almost 6 years now. They developed the adjacent parcel into the Landings at River North, and instead of moving forward with phase 2 of that development, they flipped it to Oracle for a sizable profit. $16 million is what they paid for it. $42 million is what they sold it for, which is very different than another recent transaction in the same area purchased by Oracle, whereby the longtime owner of that parcel chose not to develop it and flipped it to Oracle for the exact same amount they paid for it, which means they lost a lot of money once you factor in all the holding costs associated with carrying a very high price parcel. So that is kind of one of the themes of today's podcast is we've got very, very attractive land that is scheduled for redevelopment, and those redevelopments are just not getting off the ground. You know, the developers are having a hard time putting those deals together. Lending is still a major, major issue. And that's why you're seeing, after years of trying to get a shovel in the ground, you're seeing these very reputable, very qualified developers give up and resell that land, sometimes for a loss, sometimes for the same price that they paid. But in this case, this seller made some money on the deal. The two firms recently opened the Landings at River North, a $220 million residential office and retail development on the neighboring property. The second phase of development, which was set to include 433 units of residential in a retail building, was slated for the land just purchased by Oracle. It's been nearly 4 years since Oracle dropped $253 million for its first East Bank purchase of more than 65 acres of land for its future campus. Construction is planned. That planned construction, $1.35 billion for a riverfront office campus. That construction still has not begun. They just continue to buy, and plan, but nothing is actually getting done. Oracle's tech campus is the single largest economic development deal in city and state history. Oracle chairman Larry Ellison tagged the campus as the company's future world headquarters. So we are talking about real money. You know, the other parcel that I referenced earlier in the talk was actually sold by GPT. It was 3.7 acres, and they flipped that parcel for $60 million to Oracle. They paid $60 million, and then they flipped it to Oracle for $60 million after carrying that property for 5 years. So don't be fooled by the transaction price there. If you pay $60 million for 3.7 acres in 2021, and you carry it for 4 or 5 years, you are taking a significant loss when you resell that parcel for $60 million. So a lot going on here. Oracle continues to spend money on land and do absolutely nothing with it, right? But the bigger story here is, why are these very high profile, very high cost development sites not getting off the ground? And I will tell you, I think it is a challenge with getting all the layers of financing, equity, and debt that is required to complete one of these projects. It is still a very difficult business to be in, and I would tell you that as a commercial real estate broker myself, The biggest challenge in our marketplace today in Nashville is the cost and availability of financing. And that is what is really causing many of these projects to be delayed. And then eventually that developer says, I can't carry this anymore. We got to get out from under this parcel. And they are flipping those parcels to someone who is more confident they can get them done. And in this case, Oracle is a very, very well capitalized company who can pay cash, for $379 million cash for land that they one day will build on, but they don't seem to be in a big hurry. So Oracle, still a huge deal. I'd love to see something actually happening on the Oracle site. All right, let's continue with that same theme. Another development site doesn't proceed. Nashville-based Garrier Development, the company who made headlines when announcing plans for an amusement park in Middle Tennessee, which I never really bought. That's a great way to get attention for your company. It's big picture thinking, also very, very unrealistic, is seeking to sell a West Nashville property where it had planned a condo and retail development located at 5915 Charlotte Pike. Garrier Development announced plans for the development, which would include 160 condos and 9,000 square feet of office and retail space. It is a 1.1 acre property. They paid $2 million for the property in, again, 2021. So you're carrying this $2 million, 1.1 acre parcel of land for the last 4 years before you give up and relist that parcel, hoping that someone else feels more confident they can get the deal done. Perhaps you make a little bit of money on the deal. But most of these developers, the real money is actually completing that project, bringing it to the market, and then profiting from the finished product, not from flipping the site, even if it's got the entitlements required to actually build that concept. Most of these developers are reselling these parcels out of need, not out of want. So that is a theme that you're seeing more and more in 2025 in Nashville. Keep an eye on that. But let's talk about a development that is actually happening. A Green Hills luxury development, Nashville-based Material Ventures and Florida-based Styles Corp. recently broke ground on 2021 Crestmore, a mixed-use development next to the Green Hills Mall. 98 luxury residential units planned there and around 10,000 square feet of ground level retail. This property to rise 6 stories, located kind of behind the new CVS, if you know where that is. Slated for completion late next year, will offer 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, as well as resident lounges, terraces, fire pits, a dog run, and more. So Green Hills luxury development is getting done. That will do really well there. I'm not a huge fan of the Green Hills area. A little bit too dense for me. The traffic is horrible, but nevertheless, there is demand there, right? People want to be in Green Hills. They like the vibe in Green Hills, and I think this development will do very well there. I'm glad to see some of these developments actually being in the pipeline, and this one will soon be completed in late 2026. So very cool project for Green Hills. Speaking of residential developments, one of the most impressive in all of Middle Tennessee is called West Haven, which is in Franklin, which is where I live. One of Tennessee's largest developments is adding more residents to its community, but only for those 55 and older. Southern Land Company, a Nashville-based national real estate developer, announced Wednesday the groundbreaking of Astor Club and Residences, a new age-restricted, meaning 55 plus, rental community, right? So that's unusual. So West Haven already has a 55 and up owner community, right? Whereby you own the unit. Now they are adding a rental component and calling it Astor Club and Residences. Quote, this luxury rental community will grant people another opportunity to have a longer connection to the West Haven community, this time with a rental option outfitted with a diverse collection of amenities, services, and conveniences. 211 rental residences across 3, 4, and 5-story buildings will be the developer's first age-restricted rental community. So this is not something they've done before, but this is something they see a need for. I like the idea. West Haven, if you've never visited, is very, very cool. It's like its own little town with very, very attractive homes, large homes, very appropriate for families. I think the knock, in my opinion, the knock on West Haven is these are big homes, but they're right on top of each other. You know, you're 10 feet away from your neighbor, which I'm not really into. But the biggest thing for me is it's just a nightmare getting over there. It's gotten a little bit better when they did the Mac Hatcher extension, so there was a way to get over there without having to go directly through downtown Franklin. You know, but I had to head over there yesterday for something with my children, and I went during rush hour, and I thought, oh my God, I cannot believe anybody spends over $1 million on a home just to fight this traffic every day to get over there. So for me, wasn't worth it. But the homes are beautiful. They have like a resort style pool, which is very great for the kids. They've got different places to eat. They've got their own grocery store. They've got their own elementary school. So they've got everything but a good location, in my opinion. Anyway, let's get back to this 55 and up rental community. It's going to offer indoor and outdoor pools and spas, fire pit gathering areas, fitness and yoga studios, a salon, theater, library, golf simulator, pickleball courts, and bocce ball. Club amenities will be available to residents of Astor Club and residences and homeowners within the West Haven's active adult portion. So you've got the West Haven that everyone thinks of is really family friendly, right? Next to that, now they are appealing to just older folks, 55 and up, with these 4 purchase options and now for rent options. In addition to Astor Club and residences, West Haven's active adult section upon completion will feature 146 for sale single-family homes, villas, and townhomes. Prices for homes start in the $600,000s for townhomes, $900,000s for villas, and $1 million for single-family homes. What's the difference between a townhome and a villa? $300,000 difference between townhomes and villas. I'd have to think about that for a minute. I don't understand what they're calling a villa. We'll leave it at that. I don't get it. West Haven welcomed its first homeowners back in 2003. It's grown to include more than 2,400 households. Upon completion, the 1,500-acre community will feature 3,500 single-family homes, townhomes, and condominiums. Most recently, Southern Land Company announced details for its newest master plan community in Nolensville, which it is calling Farrington. So West Haven Light is now under construction in Nolensville, being called Farrington. The full development of West Haven is expected to finish in 2031. So Southern Land Company, these guys are the real deal. 1,500 acres is what they started with in West Haven. They're going to end that project with over 3,500 single-family homes. That's about the size of the town that I grew up in a single neighborhood. So very, very cool. If you're okay with the location, you know, West Haven is hard to beat. Next, a trophy office building lands a much-needed tenant. Holland and Knight finalized a lease for about 145,000 square feet. If you are not familiar with the office building business, that is just about as big as an office building lease is ever going to get. So that is a huge, huge deal for this landlord. That will fill 7 of the 29 floors at Symphony Place and will make the firm its largest tenant. Symphony Place located at 150 3rd Avenue in the downtown core. It is a much needed boost for the property after the loss of 4 major tenants pushed the 520,000 square foot tower's occupancy rate down to about 60%. Over the past several years, former Symphony Place tenants have collectively dumped about 265,000 square feet in the tower. So this speaks to the trend of leaving the downtown core for Germantown, for Midtown, for Williamson County. Pinnacle Financial Partners and law firm Bass, Berry & Sims both moved their headquarters to the new Nashville Yards project, while others such as PwC and Butler Snow decamped earlier this year for space elsewhere in the city. Those losses pushed Highwoods Properties, which is the owner of Symphony Place, which acquired Symphony Place for $152 million more than a decade ago, to kick off a massive capital improvement plan to reposition the property. Right? So you lose 265,000 square feet of tenants. And then when your cash flow is negative, essentially, at 60% occupancy, I expect that building has negative cash flow. They say, hey, we got to spend more money just to backfill all of that space that we just lost. So they went into a very substantial capital improvement plan. The landlord earlier this year kicked off a top-to-bottom makeover that will include lobby upgrades, new retail tenants, and a private club and park, among other improvements slated to wrap up work before the end of the year. The firm has been leasing more than 166, this is the tenant now, Holland & Knight. They had been leasing even more space, 166,000 square feet at the Nashville City Center, which is just a few blocks away. So, as a younger man, right out of grad school, I got into the office tower business, right? So I got to see behind the scenes of how these office building investments really work. And I will tell you, it is one of the most difficult asset types that exist. And the reason for that is, when you lose a tenant, you've got to spend a significant amount of money to get a new tenant, right? So you've got lease commissions that can add up to millions. You've got tenant improvements, right? So most of these office deals have what we'll call a renovation component, whereby the landlord actually renovates that existing office space to the needs of the tenant at its cost. So you've got $1 million of leasing commissions. You may have a few $1 million in tenant improvements or renovation costs before that tenant ever moves in. So you're spending millions and then making your money back a little at a time over the term of that lease, only to have that tenant vacate at the end of that lease. And then you get to start over at the beginning again with more lease commissions, more tenant improvements. And if you aren't above 80% occupancy for those office building investments, you are most likely experiencing negative cash flow. So you're actually chipping in money every month just to keep your building going, in addition to all of those leasing expenses, tenant improvement expenses that I just discussed. So the thing about the office building space is it does require a certain level of sophistication. All of that tenant improvement work, all of those capital improvement projects, which is what they're doing now in that building, that takes a certain level of sophistication to pull off, but it also takes a lot of access to money. So if you aren't able to go out and get that money to pay for those lease commissions, to pay for those tenant improvements, to make up a shortfall and for any negative cash flow you have as those tenants move out, you are in real trouble. And that's why those things can really start to spiral on these office building owners. And that's why you've seen some of these office building trade at very low prices relative to what they last traded at. It's because those owners just didn't have the money to keep it going. And it spiraled out of control, and all of a sudden it's going back to the lender. Back in the day, I owned a property management company, and we were really focused on office buildings. We managed a lot of large office buildings. Many of those buildings This was back in 2011, 2012, 2013. Many of those buildings went back to the lender, and then we were hired on as the lender's representative, and we brought those buildings back and then sold them on behalf of the lender. So I know better than most how difficult the office building investment business is. If you don't have access to large amounts of cash when you need it, I would recommend staying away from large office buildings. Let's keep moving. Introducing the Urban Cowboy Bar. Urban Cowboy Bar by boutique hotel brand Urban Cowboy recently opened in an 8,000 square foot space, bringing a saloon, cocktail lounge, forthcoming agave-driven speakeasy. Agave, I think, is tequila, right? And a locals first mindset to the historic arcade building. So the historic arcade building in downtown Nashville has been around for over 100 years. It was recently purchased by a big group that is repositioning that asset, and one of kind of the trophy end users currently is now Urban Cowboy Bar. They quote, "We're open to all, but we're very much want to be a hub for locals," which is a kind of contrarian perspective on downtown Nashville, which 90% of the business comes from tourism. New York City-based Linfield Capital bought the arcade for $28 million in 2021 and have been working on its repositioning ever since. Urban Cowboy Bar marks not only the brand's first standalone bar project, but also its debut in downtown Nashville. The design drew inspiration from some of the investors' favorite saloons, like the $1 Million Cowboy Bar in Jackson Hole. So this is kind of drawing inspiration from the $1 Million Cowboy Bar in Jackson Hole. The ground floor space is about 2,500 square feet, split between the saloon and Roberta's Pizza, which is the food operator for the space. This is the part that makes it cool for me. I don't know what this says about me, but it's packed with taxidermy, including a mountain lion, moose, bear, and a buffalo head to make it feel like an authentic 1800s saloon. While the design takes Urban Cowboy literally, they'll be playing with all sorts of tunes, including 90s hip hop, which is my favorite kind of hip hop. So taxidermy and 90s hip hop, you should have led with that. Yeah, I'm all over this. I recall I once had a lake home on a very cool lake called Okachi Lake, which is outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is where we lived for some time, not actually in Milwaukee, but in suburbs of Milwaukee. And we had a lake home nearby, and I bought this lake home, and I turned the upstairs of this lake home into this very cool kind of lake-themed cottage, which you would expect. And then on the lower level, we built it out like a log cabin. So you step into the lower level, and at least on the inside, you feel like you're in this log cabin. And to make this log cabin work, this concept work, I had a deer head on the wall, which I look back fondly on, and I went out and I bought some type of like giant stuffed muskie at a garage sale or something crazy, and I had that on the wall, and that really did make it feel like a log cabin. What I remember most about that property, which was near and dear to my heart before we moved, is we also had a hidden room that you'd push on a bookshelf, and you'd walk through this bookshelf, and that's actually where that ground floor bathroom was, which was everything in this lower level was custom made. But what I remember most about it was the taxidermy. So perhaps that's why I'm excited about the taxidermy that will be present at Urban Cowboy Bar. Upstairs, there's room for about 300 people in what they're calling a cocktail lounge. In June, Urban Cowboy will open its yet-to-be-named Agave Speakeasy. So there's more to come There's different areas of Urban Cowboy Bar within the arcade. So you've got the lower level 1800s taxidermy themed bar. You've got an upstairs cocktail lounge, and soon there's going to be an agave speakeasy. Among others, the arcade is still set to welcome buddies from the team behind East Nashville's Pearl Diver and a concept from Cafe Rosé. So from purchasing that asset in 2021, we're in 2025 now, we're starting to see some of these major tenants finally start to occupy. And in the podcast, I try to give you some behind the scenes knowledge about some of these developments. Just think of what it cost them to carry that property. $28 million from 2021 till today, and now you finally got some tenants opening and paying you rent. You're negative cash flow for 4 straight years. So have some respect for these developers that are changing Nashville for the better. It is very, very difficult to do, not only in terms of just getting these concepts planned and permitted and built and tenanted, but you've also got to come up with the money to carry that asset. $28 million that you're, at least a portion of, you are borrowing money for and paying interest on. So we should celebrate these developers in Nashville. This idea that there's these greedy developers that are making all these profits in downtown Nashville, that is a loser perspective, in my opinion. There is no more difficult business than real estate development when you're paying $28 million for the shell and carrying it for 4 years before you're ever seeing any type of positive cash flow from any of the space. We should respect these people and we should celebrate them. This idea that Nashville's being ruined by developers is a loser mentality that I completely reject. Now, we've got 3-4 more stories to cover here, and then we'll wrap this thing up. Bridgestone Arena getting a major upgrade at a $650 million cost, not only making improvements to the facility itself, but the construction of 2 future towers on the block. Slated to start in the summer of next year, it would be completed by 2030. The plan includes a 20-story tower to accommodate a hotel, which could be constructed at the southwest corner of the block, which will also include a sports bar and a bowling alley. A structure to house offices is planned on the northeast corner of the block. Once finished, Bridgestone Arena will be expanded by about 175,000 square feet and will offer restaurants, bars, and retail that will be accessible by the public. As part of the project, the existing outdoor plaza that fronts Broadway will be overhauled and include an LED canopy similar to that found on Las Vegas's Fremont Street. The arena's capacity is set to be expanded by about 700 seats, and a new press box will also be added. So Bridgestone Arena, for me, when I think of Bridgestone Arena, I think of the local hockey team. All due respect to anybody that likes hockey. Hockey is not my thing. I've never watched a minute of hockey. But you also have very important concerts being performed in Bridgestone Arena. So it's not just hockey, but also a very important concert venue in downtown Nashville that will soon have its own attached hotels, food, and beverage options in addition to just making the exterior look much cooler with an LED canopy similar to what you'd expect in Las Vegas. So very, very cool. I don't get to Bridgestone Arena often. My children are constantly begging me to take them to concerts there, which, fortunately for me, I get myself out of most of the time, but I'm sure they're going to force me to go sometime soon. So I'll report back after I experience Bridgestone Arena again. But I do think it would benefit from an overhaul and expansion. And anytime you can bring the food and beverage options right there to the arena, I think that is much easier for parents like me with a gang of kids, marching them through downtown Nashville after finding parking and then getting them into one of these overcrowded places and back to the arena on time. it just sounds like work to me. So if you could make my life easier by putting some of these concepts right there on the same block as the arena, I think that will probably increase the likelihood that Dad will step up and do the right thing and start taking his little girls to some concerts at Bridgestone. Next, the Nashville Yards entertainment concept changes. And you probably have forgotten what was planned here, so let me walk you through it. Forgive me, it's a little bit early here. I'm not fully caffeinated. A massive entertainment space slated for Nashville Yards has undergone a rebrand. In 2022, Austin-based Evo Entertainment Group announced the $20 million, 48,000 square foot Evo Entertainment Nashville Yards. The project included a 12 screen luxury dine-in cinema, a restaurant and a bar space, bowling lanes, a large gaming center, virtual reality experiences, and more. This fall, the project will open as what's now going to be called Hooky Nashville Yards. Hooky Nashville Yards is set to open this fall and will be the brand's first location in Tennessee. Quote, "We bring communities together under one dynamic roof through blockbuster films, chef-crafted dining, immersive games, and next-level activities." Nashville Yards by Southwest Value Partners is quickly becoming an entertainment and dining destination in downtown Nashville. In February, the Pinnacle opened a 4,500 capacity venue that anchors the 19-acre development. So that is an outdoor music venue known as the Pinnacle, 4,500 capacity venue that anchors the 19-acre development. Later this year, the development will welcome Fogo de Chao, Culasino, and Ocean Prime, among other restaurants. Nashville Yards, the new entryway to downtown, has a total price tag estimated to exceed $1 billion. So Nashville Yards, as you probably already know, very, very cool. They've been working on that project for a long time. It is ready to be enjoyed. So if you haven't visited Nashville Yards recently, check in, see what they have available thus far. A very, very cool concept. All right. Now, the last two stories, which we're going to keep quick, are two new bar concepts, right, in Midtown, right? So you think, when people think about bars and honky-tonks, they think about Broadway. But there's a real push to bring similar honky-tonk concepts to nearby Midtown. And one of the groups that is kind of leading that charge is called Good Time Design. Good Time Design will open game and karaoke bar called Happy Does this June in the former Kung Fu Saloon space at 1921 Division Street. The group purchased the site last summer for $6.3 million. The first Happy Does is opened in San Diego in the wake of the pandemic, drawing inspiration from the Kenny Chesney song Happy Does. Quote, "We ended up keeping the karaoke. We're going to drop in some classic games, pool tables, and stuff like that. You'll end up with the front yard space. It's all going to be redone with an outdoor bar, outdoor ping pong table. There will be DJs on weekend nights, and the food will be focused on hot dogs and pizza. The pies will be the same. The pizza will be the same as Good Time Design's Cold Town Pizza." So Cold Town Pizza is actually one of the places we eat in West Haven. So the same group that's doing these two concepts we're about to discuss also does Cold Town Pizza in West Haven, which we covered earlier in the podcast. Good Time Design just opened Odie's Bar and music venue in partnership with Old Dominion next door to Happy Does. We're going to talk about that next. They plan to remove the fence so guests can flow freely between the two spaces. In January, Good Time Design purchased the former Hopsmith Tavern space a few doors down at 1903 Division Street for another $6 million. Okay, so they've got Happy Does, they've got Odie's next door, and then a few doors down they're having another concept in the former Hopsmith Tavern space. They haven't released all the details on that project, But Good Time Design is really transforming Midtown with multiple concepts nearly right next to each other. Good Time Design's Nashville portfolio includes Cerveza Jack's, Sonny's Patio Pub, Coal Town Pizza, Coal Town Public House, which is right next to Coal Town Pizza in West Haven, and Sidecar Bar, in addition to Odie's, Happy Does, and the Hopsmith's Space concept. So these guys are heavy hitters, and they're going all in on food and beverage in Midtown, which I think is very interesting. All right, now let's talk just quickly about Odie's in Midtown. We mentioned it just briefly there. Old Dominion played several times at Good Time Design's venues in California until they outgrew them. This month, Good Time Design and Old Dominion opened the 9,000 square foot, $10 million bar and music venue called Odie's in Midtown at 1919 Division Street, the former site of Rebar. That is a 700 capacity room. Obviously, it is about live music. They invested $1.3 million in the AV rig alone, which means the audio visual rig alone. $1.3 million. Inside the live room, guests can get the full I was on a boat that day experience with a 12-seat pontoon, which I thought was cool. An outdoor backyard has a 50-foot bar featuring margarita buckets, picnic tables, lawn games, and a kitchen with self-ordering kiosks. The owner of Good Time Designs lives in the Leapers Fork area and has been investing in Nashville's hospitality scene for 9 years now. So Good Time Design going all in on Midtown with very cool concepts. So I personally think, again, I don't go to these types of places, but if I did, I would be more attracted to Midtown than I would be to Broadway. Broadway is just too much for me. It's too much. The music is so loud and the people are so drunk, and it's just not my scene. But that's what we've got for you today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the stories that we presented today. Again, the podcast is sponsored by Beechwood Commercial Real Estate Brokerage, your broker if you are a seller of a piece of commercial real estate in Nashville or the Southeast. I appreciate you all so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you again in a couple weeks. Until then, be happy, be healthy, enjoy this beautiful weather, and we'll talk to you soon.